So we're just going to take a few moments now to arrive to be present. So we can give ourselves permission to stop. To pause. For a few minutes, not to be doing anything. And as we pause, to become aware of what is present. Our bodies, feeling the body. Stepping out of thoughts, sensing. Finding the way to sense that helps us feel grounded. And centered. Maybe taking our attention to the breath, moving in the tummy. And a sense of who we are, how we are, below the surface. Closer to the core of our experience. What's present here. And then just mute the other participants, please. And maybe connecting with what brings us here. Friday night, to listen to this session. Perhaps our connection with the subject, if we have one. And then starting to make a transition in a way that feels easy, natural, smooth, with some movement. re-entering this shared space of today's session. So, I think Vimalasara is going to be speaking about herself. I know that the work that she does, which I think often goes very deep, comes from her own experience, which is also very strong and very deep in its own right. And so Vimalasara will be sharing that with us, you know, not just mindfulness for addiction as an intervention that we might offer in the way that we offer, you know, cognitive therapy or something, however good those interventions are. What I edited Vimalasara's book, actually, so I got to know her work in that way. The book that she wrote with Dr. Paramabandu Groves. And it's not just ideas for her, it's lived experience. So Vimalasara, please share both your ideas and your practices and your experience. It's lovely to have you with us. You're muted.
Microphone is off and now it's on. Hi. Thank you for that practice, Vishvapani. It's lovely to have it led and to be the student. Thank you. And lovely to be here with all of you. And it's an invitation to turn your cameras on if you're able to. It's, you know, I can find working on Zoom a really strong practice. You know, it can be a really strong practice in connecting, and it does. There's something more beautiful. Can actually see the people. I know for some people it you know, can be on the road or phone might be in your pocket. I'm one of those people. It's like, oh, another Zoom meeting, I'm gonna go for a walk and put the phone in my pocket. So if you're able to, that's really great. So thank you for those of you who have been able to turn your screen on. Okay, I'm going to put a link in the chat, and I'm going to ask you to click onto the link. Let me just, this is the link. And if people come after, if you could repost it, Vishwani. So that's the link. If you could click onto that, and now I'm going to share the screen. Let's just see. So just to say, this is anonymous. So, you know, if you type it in, I have no idea who has inputted into this, into the whiteboard. I just know how many times people have inputted into it. But I just thought, yeah, let's look at this. Yeah, what's been the most profound thing for you? Let me go like this so I can see. Okay, non-self, meditation, centering prayer as propounded by Father Thomas Keating. No idea. Like that, the mountain meditation, non-judgmental awareness. What watching mental states change, never exactly the same twice. Vipassana, I am new to mindfulness. Okay, great. Grounding exercises. Okay. Impermanence, gratitude and compassion. Let's see, so I've had, it's 23 of us and half of you have been able to input. Let's see if we can have a few more. Let's see. Learning the importance of holding things lightly, self-awareness, retreat, compassion. Okay, that's a, yeah, that's a couple of things I might ask if the person, and if you don't want to respond to that, that is okay. As I said, it's anonymous, but there's a few things that people might not get. So let me stop sharing the screen. Vipassana, person who put Vipassana, do you want to say what Vipassana is? Well, that's profound. Who put it there? All right, well, I will, do you want to share what Vipassana is, Shilpa?
One way this might work is if you raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button at the bottom, and then you'll appear at the top of people's screen and you can say a thing if you want to. Yeah.
So nasal breathing. Okay. Body scan. Yeah. What I want to say about Vipassana, for perhaps those of you who aren't familiar, that meditation practices fall into two categories. Obviously, you know, at the end it's non-dual, and there's the intersectionality of the categories, but you have samatha practices, which I'd say mindfulness practices often fall into that category, that camp. And samatha practices are practices to help calm the mind, to help calm the central nervous system. And, you know, anybody who has experienced trauma, any kind of trauma, you know, the central nervous system becomes out of whack. And these samatha practices can really help to soothe the central nervous system. Vipassana practices is a category of what we call insight practices. And again, there is the intersectionality of the two. They're not so binary, but it's more insight practices, seeing things as they really are, I would say, rather than how we want them to be. We really begin to see things really clearly. So moving on to that, somebody said non-self. Who somebody, you able to out yourself who said non-self? Do you want to say, Bob, what you meant by non-self?
Yes, it was kind of a quick reaction. And I think there are different things that have been profound at different times in your life, but that was the one that popped up for me. I suppose it's in secular mindfulness. Of course, we don't teach or talk about non-self particularly, but I do have a sort of my meditation practice was rooted in Buddhism, and so so non-self is one of the kind of key teachings there. But I guess it's profound because it's that realization of the conditioned, of that we're you know, we construct the world and we are constructed ourselves. You know, and it's an interesting and profound sort of teaching to contemplate. You know. You know, your own existence, your own opinions, your own views about yourself and about the world, and whether they hold water or not. I mean, I could go on, but that's probably enough. I'm sure you maybe you want to say something.
No, that's great. Thank you. Because yeah, Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the ways to make that teaching even more accessible is to see the emptiness in our stories. You know, these stories that we have are fabrications, that we're mind making machines. You know, it's like we're continually making sense out of all these things which have no truth in them. And actually what mindfulness can do, actually, it's just that mindfulness is really, we can really begin to see that our thoughts aren't facts. Yeah, yeah. And that we don't have to identify with our thoughts. So yeah, thank you, because I think the reason why I wanted to posit that question is because mindfulness has been very profound in my life. I often say that actually many people who have experienced what I have experienced are on medication. And I say the strongest medication I take is arnica at the moment. So I'm very fortunate. At some point I might have to take stronger medication. And I always remember actually in my 20s, a doctor writing me a prescription. And I remember tearing it up because I was a chronic bulimic. So what's the point? What's the point of giving me medication if I'm chronic bulimic? It's not going to stay down, is it? So I tore it up. You know, it may have helped. But I think that because I came across the mindfulness teachings in my 20s, and I'm now almost 60, I shall be 60 at the end of this year, so over half my life, that actually it's my medicine, my medication. Some Buddhists will get gray hairs. I haven't got any gray hairs at the moment. I'm sure we'll get them when I say, actually, for me, mindfulness or Buddhism was my therapy to begin with. It was, and there's nothing wrong with that. Mindfulness can be people's therapies. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If that's helping people to transform, helping people to change, fine. Don't tell people it isn't their therapy. For me, there was a point when it became something more than that. It became a way of life in terms of a spiritual context. So I think, in a way, what do I mean by that? In terms of becoming aware of ethics. Ethics is so important, and we know that in a lot of corporate mindfulness, that ethics is missing, and ethics is a very important part of mindfulness. Okay, so I do have a PowerPoint, so let's just see how we go. Vishvapani said I was going to talk about myself, and it's really interesting that actually through these teachings I have so much less identification to the past that often actually it's quite difficult to talk about the past because it's not me anymore. And once upon a time, it was very much me, and I identified with it so much that I was on that vicious cycle of compulsive behaviors. And what mindfulness can do is really loosen that identification of the past. I often say, what would it be like? What would it be like if you never ever told somebody about your past? You know, it's just here. What will, you know, often it's like, okay, get to know me. Let me tell you about my past, about my story. But actually, this is who we are now, and we do know that if we haven't done the work, then we are still holding on to the past, and we're still living through that lens of the past. And what mindfulness can do is actually teach us to live through the lens of now. Yeah. How can we begin to live through that lens of now? Because in this moment now, we impact that next moment now, which is you know, when I say that, it gives me goosebumps that what we have is now, yeah, and we can impact that next moment. So it's not to say, you know, if we've been unskillful that we pretend it didn't happen. We don't have to keep on giving ourselves a hard time, because we can change in this next moment now. Okay, so let's see how we do. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, you know, for me, I'm somebody who really did have addictive behaviors. I was functional. I worked as a international correspondent covering Aboriginal deaths in custody out in Australia, Aboriginal land rights, came back to England. In fact, I've still got it. I actually had an interview with Margaret Thatcher. Yeah, this is my claim to fame. I had an interview with Margaret Thatcher, but the letter I've got is when they reneged on it. My whole life would have changed. Imagine if I'd interviewed Margaret Thatcher. I don't know whether I'd be in this place now, but she reneged on it. And I always smile, because I think they most probably did a police check on me as a juvenile. I had a string of offences as a juvenile, so they must have thought, no, maybe this isn't the person to interview Margaret Thatcher. Anyway, yeah. So I was functional, but I got to the point where my nostrils collapsed, and I knew that I had done damage to the brain, and I knew that I needed to change my life. And through that, what I became aware of, when I was able to let go of all these things that was protecting me, these addictive compulsive behaviors, which are like protectors, which was protecting me, I realized my biggest addiction was my stinking thinking. That I can remember sitting bolt up in my bed thinking, oh my God, my biggest addiction is my stinking thinking. And that was a revelation. Yeah, I thought, I'd let go of all those gross addictions, I'm fine. And then realizing, oh my God, this is what I have to deal with. And actually realizing that actually many people hold on to their addictive or compulsive behaviors because it's too scary to come into relationship with that stinking thinking, with that, for some people, it's they just don't want to be in relationship with it. Yeah. So so really, how do we begin to break that vicious cycle of stinking thinking? How do we begin to move beyond trauma? And I would say that all of us experience some kind of trauma, but not everybody who has trauma has addictive or compulsive behaviors. Everybody who's got compulsive or addictive behaviors has trauma. And again, through the mindfulness approach, and again, it's one of these great Buddhist teachings. Apparently, Brene Brown is now quoting Buddhism or mindfulness, talking about the near enemies of loving kindness or the near enemies of compassion. I always have this joke that actually Buddhists are getting poorer on mindfulness and the non-Buddhists are getting rich on mindfulness. That's something for us to think about. But anyway, how important it is to become aware of the body, feeling, thoughts, emotions, and actions. Yeah. And again, if we move into more insight into the insight of that, how do we begin to see the emptiness of the body, the emptiness of feelings, thoughts, and emotions, which is a practice. Yeah. So this for me, I would say that loving kindness, again, which is a really important part of mindfulness. And I know that when we are delivering perhaps an 8-week mindfulness program, there isn't the time to teach the whole practice of loving kindness. And yet loving kindness is such an important part of mindfulness. In fact, some people talk about the 3 stages of mindfulness. As mindfulness, we become aware of the breath, we become aware of the body. And then we moved into the 2nd phase of mindfulness, which was compassion. It's all become about compassion. And now there is this 3rd wave of mindfulness, which is looking at the ontological self, which is looking more at insight and actually really seeing how mindfulness isn't just a practice that can help your employees perform better at work, or how can you get the best production values out of your employees, or it isn't just about feeling good and feeling better. And that is really important, because for some people, they've never experienced that positivity that can naturally come from within, that spring of positivity. And so it is really important. And is that what we want to settle for? And so some people, that's just all what they want to settle for. And mindfulness can take us further. It can take us beyond it. It can take us to freedom and liberation. And so one of the things which is really important, I love Galway Kinnell here, is to reteach a thing its loveliness. And when I think of that, I think of Rumi's poem, which is, "Be crumbled. Let wild flowers grow up where you are. You have been stony far too long. Do something different, surrender. Be crumbled. Let wild flowers grow up where you are. You have been stony far too long. Do something different, surrender." And for me, this encapsulates, it encapsulates what mindfulness, for us to really absorb, to really metabolize the mindfulness teachings within our being. We have to be crumbled. We have to reteach a thing its loveliness. We have to take a risk. So I think at this point, I'm going to do a reflective practice. In my course that I developed with Dr. Parambandu Groves, I developed a loving kindness practice. As I said, there wasn't the time to go through the whole meta practice, and especially working in the field of addictions, compulsive behaviors, trauma. For me, it was really important to have a loving kindness practice, because loving kindness transformed my life. The whole practice of loving kindness transformed my life. So I developed a practice called the 5 basic needs of the heart, which I didn't come up with these needs. There are books called the 4 basic needs of the heart: attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance. And actually, I came across these needs from Deepak Chopra. It was one of, remember back in the day when Deepak Chopra was the one who was popularizing meditation, 21 days meditation, before he was doing it with Oprah. And it was his very first one. And I remember listening to him saying how important it was for people to give us attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance. And I remember thinking, I know you're Deepak Chopra, but I really don't believe in that, you know. And so, of course, because I had bought the series, I could go back to really see, was that what I heard? And it was what I had heard. And the reason why it didn't resonate for me is because you can give people all the love, all the affection, and they still don't change, okay? What's most important is that we learn to give ourselves attention. We learn to give ourselves affection, appreciation, and acceptance. That's what's really important. Those of you who are perhaps mindfulness practitioners, the most important thing for all of us is to practice. Because I know that actually it's not so much what I say, it's in my being that people feel the practice. I can talk this, but if I'm not practicing, people can feel that. I know people will say it's like people can feel the calmness. That's it. Especially when you're working with dysregulated people, what you're doing, your mindfulness practice is regulating their central nervous system. These people are sensitive. So I really can't say how important it is for those of us who want to teach mindfulness. The only way to teach it is to live it. And I'm not saying that you have to be perfect. That's not what I'm saying. And actually, it's not much, because the average person isn't going to be doing mindfulness. So there isn't a lot that you have to be doing. It's not like 24/7, you've got to be on mindfulness. But if you have a daily practice and you have an ethical practice, that's going to put you in good stead, the minimum of that. So, so coming back to this practice of the 5 basic needs of the heart, also, it's really important for us to have a good relationship with ourselves. That's part of mindfulness, yeah. And, often in this field, we can talk about vicarious trauma, or we can talk about compassion fatigue. And in a way, they're stories, they're labels, they're stories, because actually what's actually happening is that we can give it a great label, go to the doctors and get ourselves signed off work because we've got compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma. And what is actually happening is that actually what's happened is that there's something in work that's activated us and telling us that's the work. We just need to do more work in this area, that there's just something unresolved in us, and that's what it's pointing to. And so many of us have a difficult relationship with ourselves. So we're going to do this practice of the 5 basic needs of the heart, a bit short practice, and then we will perhaps talk about it. Okay. All right, so if you settle yourself, just becoming aware of the body, paying attention to the body. We're going to be paying attention to the body today by just asking, what is it that your body needs right now? So ask yourself, see what pops up in your mind. What is it that your body needs right now? Really just notice that without judgment. And if it needs to lie down, then just let the body lie down. If it needs a drink, let it have a glass of water or something. Just noticing what the body needs right now. Now just notice what's happening in the mind. Just paying attention to what's happening in the mind. And without judgment, just noticing what's happening in the mind. That's all. Without identifying with what's happening in the mind. And ask yourself, what is the heart experiencing right now? What's your heart experiencing right now? And there's no wrong answer or response. Now, just becoming aware of your feet, paying attention to the feet, to your legs, sitting bones, torso, arms, shoulders, head. Just paying attention to this unique body, this body that has carried you this far in life. Just giving it some attention. And just noticing if this experience of paying attention to yourself is pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or mixture of all three. So just noticing, maybe you experience this as unpleasant. That's okay. It's fine. That's just your experience. It's just an experience. Be aware of going into the story, but just notice that there was tension in the body that was experiencing unpleasantness, or perhaps there was expansion in the body, which was more experience of pleasurableness, or perhaps it was just neutral. Affection. Kind of cultivate affection. Notice what happened when I said the word affection. Notice if the body contracted, whether there was a clenching in the jaw or in the hands. Just noticing affection, what happens. Know at any time if you experience some activation, you can open your eyes and look around the room. You can stand up or, resource yourself. You don't have to sit and grit your teeth and go through this if this experience of affection is activating. So really allow yourself to take care of yourself. Yeah. So affection. You see if you can see yourself in your mind's eye, as if you were looking at yourself in a mirror. And perhaps those of you who have your camera screen on could actually look at yourself on the screen with affection, with just warm, kind, loving eyes, and just look at yourself. Yeah, with affection. Yeah. Remember to breathe. And you could raise your hands and hold yourself if you'd like. All of these are invitations, whatever feels good for you. Or you can place a hand on your heart or on your belly. And just giving yourself some affection. You can rock yourself. Especially if you're experiencing some stuckness, the dorsal kind of shutting down and needing the ventral nerve to open up a bit, just move the body. And at some point, have the sense of cradling a newborn in your lap, experiencing the weight of a newborn in your lap, and just holding that with affection. Yeah. Could be a newborn kitten, a newborn puppy, a newborn baby, whatever, it's newborn. And at some point, as you look at this newborn with affection, this newborn is you. So just looking at this tiny new you with affection. And then bringing this newborn closer and closer to your belly, or closer and closer to your heart, integrating this newborn into your whole being with affection. And again, noticing if this experience of cultivating affection towards oneself was pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or a mixture of all three. And it doesn't matter which one it was, you're just noticing your experience, your direct experience. Appreciation, cultivating appreciation towards the self. Really see if you can sit with appreciation towards the self. And if it's hard to sit with appreciation, you could just appreciate yourself for being here this evening or this afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and just really appreciate yourself for choosing to be here. You didn't have to be here, you chose to be here. So just appreciate yourself for being here. And just again, noticing if this experience of cultivating appreciation towards the self was pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or mixture of all three. And just turning towards your experience without judgment. Acceptance. Cultivating acceptance towards the self. Notice what happens when I say acceptance, accepting the self. Did you hear a voice speaking in your head? Whose voice was it? Was it yours, or a parent, or somebody of authority? See if you can let it go. Acceptance is in the now. That's where acceptance is. We're stuck in the past. We're never going to have acceptance. If we're fantasizing in the future, we're never going to have acceptance. Acceptance is in the now. Now. All you have to accept right now is the person who's here listening to this practice. Just be with your direct experience in this moment now. 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 And just notice what's arising in the mind, heart. Notice these thoughts. Are they thoughts of the past? Thoughts of the future? Just notice what your tendency is. And stepping back into the now, just accepting thoughts have arisen, distracted you, and bring yourself back to now. And again, just noticing, cultivating acceptance to oneself, the whole of the self, if possible. Was that pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or a mixture of all three? And turning towards your experience with compassion, with kindness, with warmth. And so, in this final stage of allowing, just allowing anything to arise without me giving any prompts. So just really see if you can take a breath and pause, open, relax. Trust what emerges. Listen deeply and attune to your truth. So just really, just see what arises, allow it to arise without identifying it, without thinking, this is me, mine, I. And just know whatever arises, this is not you, this is not, or this is not me, this is not mine, this is not I. So I'll stop speaking and give you just a couple of minutes to be on your own with allowing. And so taking a breath in and expanding the breathing throughout the whole body. Then we're going to radiate this out to each and every one of us, this kindness and warmth that we've cultivated for ourselves. Let's kind of share it among us. So again, it's an invitation to turn your camera screen on. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at each other and just radiate warmth and kindness towards each other. So we're going to be receiving. It's a great thing. One of the great things about Zoom, if we were in person, it'd be so much more difficult to do this. It'll be laughter, but we don't know who's actually looking at us. So just take everybody in, and even those of you who have your cameras off, we'll be looking at your names and sending warmth and kindness towards you too. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put another link in the chat. So again, if you click onto this link, and again, if you type, it's anonymous. We don't know who has shared. And then let's do this. So again, an invitation to share your experience. I think one of the most important things when we are sharing mindfulness practices is always important. The inquiry is really important, is to inquire into people's experience. Often, why children become so traumatized because there was nobody to speak to. Yeah. I mean, I just find it incredible, the amount of times I hear children who are now adults who say they had a parent who died and they were sent to school, sent to school, couldn't talk about it, had to just go on as normal. It's just an example, but there are so many things where things happened and they couldn't speak about it. And that's what creates the trauma, what goes on inside us. Yeah. And so what mindfulness is doing is enabling us to have the voice to be able to speak about our experience. So important. So what we can do is we can do a mindfulness exercise and just move on. And so we have reactivated something in those adults which happened to them in childhood, that we share this experience, perhaps this exercise, which can be one workshop in itself, this exercise, and we don't have the opportunity for people to share their experience. So again, an invitation to share your experience. I found the final part quiet, moving, sharing with others and receiving warmth. sometimes difficult to feel affection for myself, much easier to feel affection for others. When I got sober, I realized why I wanted to escape reality so often. A feeling of safety, drifting off slightly, but knowing I was held in a practice in the presence of others. I felt pleasantly sleepy. The strongest part was the image of myself as a baby. I felt as if I was actually remembering that feeling and being that baby, very vulnerable, a bit confused. There was something very familiar in that feeling. Yeah. Cute. I was wondering if there's any more of you who'd like to share. It's about a quarter of you. I think there's 24, 6 people have shared. So as I say, it's an invitation, you don't have to. But again, really encouraging you to have your voice. I think it's so important to accept that we are acceptable. I enjoyed the activity. I did realize that I do struggle with affection towards myself. I find I have a lot of judgments towards myself. Feeling of being a failure came up, and naming of the state I'm used to, but haven't named before. Okay. Safe, settled, surrounded, and supported, comforting. Now, exclamation mark. Yeah. Now. I enjoyed connecting with baby me, taking care of me, felt myself feeling happy and smiling and strong enough to look after me. Built on a lot of inner child work I did in treatment. Yeah. Okay, I mean, again, please, even when I stop the share, please, if you'd like to type into this, then please do. I'm not going to ouch anybody here. What I will say is just to, for all of us to remember that feeling a failure isn't a feeling, and to really get in connection with the story. What's the story of failure? Because there's a story. There's a story there. Because and that's one of the things. I think one of the radical things about mindfulness there are only 3 feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Just 3 feelings. That's radical. That's rad. And I think that when you get that, there can be real freedom and liberation, and realize that everything else is a story. We're not saying it didn't happen, but it's just a story that we identify with, a story we keep on telling ourselves, something that was projected onto us. And if we can see that actually it's a story rather than a feeling, that can give us space. And often we're doing it all the time. We talk as if things are feelings, and they're not feelings, they're stories. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to pause and a drink of water. We'll have some questions, but let me let's play one of my favorite videos. Let me see if this is going to work. Share screen. Oh, nope. See, wasn't meant to do that. Oh, it doesn't seem. Let's come out and stop sharing. Oh. Oh, it can't go on the big screen. Okay, let's do this again.
Should we have some sound, Vimalasara? Can't hear anything.
On first. I'm asking you who's on first. That's the man's name. Fellow playing first base for St. Louis. Who? The guy on first base. Who is on first? Well, what are you asking me for? I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Who is on first? I'm asking you who's on first. That's the man's name. That's whose name? Yes. Well, go ahead and tell me. Who? The guy on first. Who? The first base. Who is on first? Have you got a first baseman on first? Certainly. Then who's playing first? Absolutely. When you pay off the first baseman every month, who gets the money? Every dollar of it. Why not? The man's entitled to it. Who is? Yes. So who gets it? Why shouldn't he? Sometimes his wife comes down and collects it. Whose wife? Yes. After all, the man earns it. Who does? Absolutely. Well, I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base? Oh, no. What is on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? That's what I'm trying to find out. Well, don't change the players. I'm not changing nobody. Take it easy. What's the guy's name on first base? What's the guy's name on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. We're not talking about him. How did I get on third base? You mentioned his name. If I mention a third baseman's name, who did I say is playing third? No, who's playing first? Stay off of first, will you? Well, what do you want me to do? Now, what's the guy's name on third base? Well, what's on second? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. There I go, back on third again. Well, I can't change their names. Will you please stay on third base, Mr. Broadhurst? Now, what is it you want to know? What is the fella's name on third base? What is the fella's name on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. Third base. Woo! You got an outfield? Oh, sure. St. Louis has got a good outfield? Absolutely. The left fielder's name? Why? I don't know. I just thought I'd ask you. Well, I just thought I'd tell you. Then tell me who's playing left field. Who is playing first? Stay out of the infield. How much names out here? I want to know what's the fella's name in left field. What is on second? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who is on first? I don't know. Third base. Take it easy, man.
Okay, that says it all. All right. Sorry, I have to remember when you got your headphones in and you're playing a bit audio, you can't hear it. So apologies for that. Let's put my headphones back in. Okay. Let's have any questions? Reflections, doesn't even have to be questions, reflections. Bob, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had those technical problems on there. It happens to all of us, doesn't it? I was confused by that last piece. Maybe that I was just with my confusion about it. So I was looking for my experience in that. But so I guess my question is do you even feel it's necessary to say something about that, or do you think it's implicit that what was there a message in there? I mean, how do you interpret it, or is it just something you throw out there and see what the reaction is to from people?
I think what's important is what went on for you in your experience. what goes on for you when you don't get it.
Quite.
That's more important. Yeah. And you may be speaking for many others here. There may be others here. Yeah. Yeah.
Watching that clip actually made me feel quite joyful, because it reminded me of my childhood. And it was quite interesting, because when we were doing the previous exercise, I was having very negative feelings about my childhood. And I think sometimes it's quite easy to paint a very dark storyline about your childhood, and then watching Abbott and Costello there kind of just made me kind of realize actually there was quite a lot of joy in my childhood as well. And as people say, it's never too late to have a good childhood.
Thank you. Any other reflections? Let's just move to this piece as this came up, and then we can move on with regards to the Albert and Costello piece. Any other reflections? Okay. I'll say something about it. For me, I love this piece because it really demonstrates how we can just get stuck on something, and we can just keep on going over and over the same thing, you know, a bit like a dog with a slipper, and just going over and over and over again on the same thing. And you know, and in here, the nightmare, you know, who is the writer, who are the actors in our minds, who are the protagonists, who's the director, who's the producer, and who gets to be on first. So for me, it really, what I love about this is how we can just get trapped in that cycle. You know, they never moved on, they just were stuck, just going around and around and around and around and around. And it is confusing when we go around and around and around and around, and how we get trapped. Yeah. 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 Any other reflections or questions in general?
Yes, sorry, I haven't raised my hand. I just started talking. Sorry.
That's okay. We're small enough.
That's a Zoom fail.
We're a small enough group
yeah.
for that to happen. Yeah.
Apologies if somebody else was about to speak and I butted in. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed that. And I guess for me, be interested just to hear your thoughts or reflections on the role of compassion, because I felt it really strongly throughout the practice. And whether or not you kind of see it as, just an integral part of the mindfulness, and if it was missing, would it be a bit like, you know, the ethics missing from the workplace course in a way? So it's kind of part reflection, part question, I guess.
Yeah, often we hear that without wisdom you can't have compassion, without compassion you can't have wisdom. It's two wings of a bird. And what I would say is that when we are able to cultivate ethics and mindfulness, that it's almost as if compassion would just spontaneously arise. So I think sometimes, you know, people can go for, we've got to be compassionate, we've got to be compassionate. And I think actually it's far more the easier route is to really to become more ethical, more mindful, and then compassion will be the flowering of our mindfulness and ethical practice. So in a way, I would say, rather than is it important, the role that it is, compassion is an aspect of mindfulness. Yeah, if we're truly practicing mindfulness, you know, in its fullness, in its bloom, then compassion will arise. I mean, I know for me, my practice of compassion, I mean, I never, for an example, I never thought, oh, actually, I don't think I was ever somebody who would kill flies or whatever. But, you know, when people go like that, but I know that I've become so much more sensitive to that kind of thing, so much more sensitive to beings which are just so tiny. But I never thought, oh, I have to be compassionate to this. That is just something that has just arisen out of my mindfulness and ethical practice. So I'd say compassion, you know, you in a way, is it mindfulness if we don't have compassion? Yeah. And it's something that we keep on cultivating. I think compassion is when we get ourselves out of the way, isn't it? It's like, if we're in the way, it's not possible for us to be compassionate. So again, how can we get ourselves out of the way? And so even now, you know, once upon a time, you know, with some of those tragic things that happen out there in the world, for me, what often wells up is like, what happened to that person for them to do that? Yeah. So it's not justifying their actions, but it's just so easy to go into that hatred or aversion. But actually, what happened for somebody to do those actions? Something must have happened, you know. So I would say that compassion comes out of a practice of ethical mindfulness.
Thank you.
Can mindfulness become an escape, like an addiction? Well, if it can be, it's a better escape, mindfulness than addiction. Can mindfulness be addictive? What I would say is that I would talk about spiritual bypassing, that I think that actually that we can be mindfulness practitioners or Buddhist practitioners, whatever you want to call yourself, and we can spiritually bypass. And what I mean by that is, in fact, that was a term that was coined by somebody called Wellwood. Can't think of his first name. In the 80s, he was a psychotherapist. But it's almost like we want to be happy as long as we can be happy and we can feel good. And that's what some people want to be able to feel good. We don't want to have to deal with the stuff. I don't want to have to deal with that crap. That we can spiritually bypass. That we don't do the work that needs to be done. Yeah. So I always say that if you think of the prince, before the prince became woke, the prince didn't vow to find enlightenment. Yeah. And I think there's a reason why he didn't vow to find enlightenment, because that's what many of us are doing out there in the world. We want this enlightenment, we want this, you know, we want that. And actually, because we would spiritually bypass, the prince vowed to find an end of suffering. And that's the route to enlightenment, to find an end of suffering. Because of suffering, you have to turn towards the suffering, face the suffering, see the emptiness in suffering, to free oneself. Yeah. And of course, again, you know, with that question, Shilpa, can it be addictive? If we think of the wheel of life, if you think of the Buddhist wheel of life, there is the God realm, okay, where people can be in that God realm, okay, which can be very seductive, very enticing. But at some point, they fall out of the God realm and fall back into perhaps a hell realm, a Titan realm, an animal realm, a human realm, whatever realm. So their mindfulness can be a trap. Anything can be a trap. You know, going to live in a monastery can be a trap. You know, it's so anything can be a trap. So that's how I'd answer that question. Can mindfulness be risky where there was a dual diagnosis, example, serious mental illness? What I would say is it's really...
Vimalasara.
Yeah.
Sorry, just about it. Please do answer that question. That's an important question. But I just want to just let you know, we've got 5 minutes now. So in that 5 minutes, please finish your answer. But I also want to have time to hear about your event in London.
Sure.
And then just to wrap up. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, so what I would say is, if you're working with somebody with a dual diagnosis or serious mental illness, then it's really important to be part of a team and not to be working in a silo. Because if somebody's got a serious mental illness, then there's going to be a team normally with them working, and that would be a conversation with the psychiatrist, looking at what medicate, because sometimes doing meditative practices on certain medications isn't the best thing to do. So that's what I would say. The short answer is find out what the care team is, and to see if you can have the invitation to talk to the people who are supporting them. Okay, it can help and sometimes it can't help. It's, as I say, it's not a panacea. It doesn't work for everyone, for everything. Okay, yeah. Thank you for inviting me to do this Vishvapani. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, great to do it while I'm here in England. So I'm actually here in England, and I am going to be doing a 3-day training on Mindfulness Based Addiction Recovery. It's in, if you could put the link in the who's my session support? Somebody who's session support asked me to send the link. Thank you. It's a 3-day training happening on Wednesday. Wednesday, I'll put it in because I think I don't know, my session support has gone. Let me just get the link. So it's going to be in London. So if you can be spontaneous, it's based at in a breathing space at the London Buddhist Centre, and it's a training to really reflect on yourself as practitioners, also to reflect on yourself if you're somebody who has lived experience of addiction, struggling with addiction. Also, it's for people who perhaps who are working in the field, and you go away with some tools. And it is the course is actually accredited by BAMBA, by the British Association of Mindfulness Approaches. And if you click onto the, oh, I put the wrong link in, that's a Mentimeter link, sorry. Click onto the link, and yeah, it would be great to see 1 or 2 of you. You never. No, Liam did it. Liam, are you still here? Liam, do you want to say a couple of things about the training?
Yeah, I find it incredibly valuable, and yeah, I use it in my work very regularly, so I'd highly recommend it. Okay.
Yeah, and if money is an issue and you think you'd love to do it and you'd like to have a scholarship or something, then write to them and just say, you know, can you have a reduction or whatever? So don't let money get in the way. And yeah, if I don't see you this time, maybe I'll see you next year. I think I'll be back in July and we'll be delivering it. Well, you never know what's going to be happening in the world. So let's stay in now. Hopefully I will be delivering it Wednesday to Friday next week. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vimalasara. Just to explain, Vimalasara, although despite her London accent and the London course, actually lives in Vancouver. So she's this is a rare opportunity to do a course with her. Well, unless you travel to Vancouver, I suppose. But it's also a delightful opportunity to have you share an evening and share your experience, and everything you do is so fully felt and so fully embodied. None of it is just ideas. It comes from you, from your experience, from your life. I feel you've really shared that, and it's such a gift, because you in sharing yourself, you've shared, well, you've that's how you help us, you help me to experience myself, because that's what you've done for yourself. Hope I'm making sense. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
That's it.
Okay.
Thanks to everyone for attending. It's past, so we aim to finish promptly. Have a good weekend, and hopefully we'll see you again before too long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.